The slap echoed through the pristine white corridors of Soul Grace Hospital like a gunshot. Nurse Elizabeth's head snapped to the side, her vision blurring as pain exploded across her cheek. She stumbled backward, her hand instinctively flying to her stomach, protecting the precious life growing inside her. The medical chart she'd been holding clattered to the floor, papers scattering like fallen leaves. "That's what happens when incompetent staff waste my time," the man said, his voice dripping with contempt. He was tall, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Elizabeth's annual salary, his perfectly styled hair not a strand out of place. His lips curved into a smile that made Elizabeth's blood run cold. Not a smile of joy, but one of pure arrogance, as if he'd just stepped on an insect and found it amusing. Elizabeth's co-worker, Nurse Park, gasped and rushed to her side. "Are you okay? Should I call security?" But the man was already walking away, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the polished floor, that insufferable smile still plastered on his face. He didn't even look back. To him, Elizabeth was nothing. Less than nothing. Just another obstacle in his day that he'd dealt with and dismissed. What he didn't know was that the woman he'd just struck was married to the most dangerous man in Seoul. A man whose name was whispered in fear in the darkest corners of the city. A man who would burn the entire world down for her. If you're ready for a story of love, revenge, and justice served cold, stay tuned. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because this is going to be one wild ride. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Elizabeth stood frozen in the hallway, her hands still pressed against her burning cheek. Her ears were ringing, and she could taste copper in her mouth where her teeth had cut the inside of her lip. Around her, other nurses and visitors had stopped to stare, their expressions ranging from shock to pity. She hated the pity most of all. "Elizabeth, we need to report this," Nurse Park insisted, her voice trembling with anger. "That's assault. You're pregnant, for God's sake. What kind of monster hits a pregnant woman?" Elizabeth finally found her voice, though it came out shakier than she would have liked. Who was that man?" "That's Kang Ji-hoon," another nurse whispered, appearing at her elbow. "The pharmaceutical billionaire. His company supplies half the medications in this hospital." He was yelling because his mother's private room wasn't ready when he arrived. "I tried to explain that the previous patient needed more time for discharge," Elizabeth said, her voice growing stronger as shock gave way to anger. "I was polite. I was doing my job. He had no right." "Men like that think they have every right," Nurse Park said bitterly. "They think money means they can do whatever they want." Elizabeth bent down carefully, mindful of her growing belly, to pick up the scattered papers. As she gathered them, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't need to check it to know who it was. Even when he was in meetings, even when he was dealing with his business, her husband always seemed to know when something was wrong. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. Sure enough, a message from Daesung lit up her screen. "Are you okay, Nae Sarung? I felt something. Call me." Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. Not from the pain of the slap, but from the overwhelming love she felt for the man who could sense her distress even from across the city. She quickly typed back, "I'm fine. Just a long day. I'll tell you when I get home." She couldn't tell him now. Not here. Not in a text message. Because she knew her husband, knew him better than anyone else in this world. Kim Daesung was many things, dangerous, powerful, ruthless when necessary, but when it came to her, he was protective to the point of obsession. If she told him now what had happened, he would leave whatever he was doing and this entire hospital would become a war zone. "Let me check you over," Nurse Park said, gently guiding Elizabeth to a nearby empty examination room. "You took a hard hit. We need to make sure the baby is okay." The word of baby made Elizabeth's protective instincts surge even stronger. She had been 3 months pregnant, just beginning to show. She and Daesung had tried for 2 years, had almost given up hope, and then this miracle had happened. This precious, beautiful miracle. As Nurse Park checked her vital signs and the baby's heartbeat, Elizabeth's mind raced. She should report this. She should file charges. But she knew how these things went. Rich men like Kang Ji-hoon had lawyers that could make problems disappear. He would claim she had been rude, that he had merely gestured and she'd exaggerated. The hospital board would side with the man whose company kept them supplied with medications at competitive prices. The injustice of it made her want to scream. "The baby's heartbeat is strong," Nurse Park said with relief. "But you should still tell your husband. Isn't he that businessman who comes to pick you up sometimes? The one with the expensive cars?" Elizabeth almost laughed. Businessman. If only that were all he was. She had met Kim Dae-sung 3 years ago in the emergency room of this very hospital. He'd been brought in with a gunshot wound to the shoulder, accompanied by 6 terrifying-looking men in black suits. The attending physician had been too scared to treat him, hands shaking so badly he couldn't hold the instruments. Elizabeth had stepped in. She hadn't cared who he was or what he'd done. She'd seen a man in pain who needed help, and she'd helped him. She'd cleaned the wound, removed the bullet, and stitched him up while lecturing him about the importance of seeking proper medical care and staying out of dangerous situations. His men had looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Nobody lectured Kim Dae-sung. But he had listened to every word, his dark eyes never leaving her face, a slight smile playing at his lips. "What's your name?" he'd asked when she was done. "Elizabeth." "Elizabeth," he'd repeated, as if tasting the name. "It suits you. It means eternal, doesn't it?" She'd been surprised he knew. "Yes. My mother was Nigerian, my father was American. They wanted a name that meant something lasting." "I'm going to marry you, Elizabeth," he'd said with absolute certainty. She'd laughed, thinking he was delirious from pain medication. But 3 days later, he'd returned to the hospital with flowers and a dinner invitation. 3 months after that, she'd learned exactly who Kim Dae-sung was, the CEO of Baekdu Industries, a legitimate import-export business on the surface, but underneath, the head of the most powerful organized crime family in Seoul. She should have run. Any sane woman would have run. But by then, she'd seen the man beneath the reputation. She'd seen his kindness, his intelligence, his surprising gentleness. She'd seen how he protected those he considered family, how he had a code of honor that most legitimate businessmen lacked. And she'd seen how he looked at her, like she was the sun and the moon and every star in the sky. They'd been married 6 months later in a private ceremony. Her father had walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes, while Dae-sung's men had surrounded the venue in discreet security. It was the merging of 2 worlds that should never have met, but somehow fit together perfectly. Now, as Elizabeth finished her shift and walked toward the hospital exit, every step reminded her of what had happened. Her cheek still throbbed. Her pride hurt even more. The black Mercedes was already waiting at the curb, exactly where it always was at the end of her shift. But today, Dae-sung wasn't sitting in the back like usual. He was leaning against the car, arms crossed, his sharp eyes taking in every detail of her appearance the moment she walked through the doors. She'd seen him in his tailored 3-piece suits at charity galas, charming Seoul's elite. She'd seen him in casual clothes on lazy Sundays, cooking her breakfast. She'd seen him in nothing at all, his body pressed against hers in the dark. But this Dae-sung, the one watching her with eyes that missed nothing, this was the dangerous one. The one that had made him a legend in Seoul's underworld. His driver, Jin-ho, opened the car door, but Dae-sung didn't move. He pushed off from the car and walked toward her, closing the distance in long strides. When he reached her, his hand came up gently to cup her face, tilting it toward the light. His jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle jump. When he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. "Who touched you?" "Dae-sung, it's nothing." "Who touched you?" Each word was precisely enunciated, cold as ice. Elizabeth's hand covered his, her thumb stroking his wrist in the way that usually calmed him. "Not here. Take me home. I'll tell you everything at home." For a moment, she thought he might refuse. His eyes had gone dark, that dangerous stillness settling over him that meant violence was simmering just beneath the surface. But then he looked down at her belly, visible now beneath her scrubs, and took a deep breath. "Home," he agreed. "But you will tell me everything, Elizabeth. Everything." The drive home was silent except for the soft classical music playing through the car's speakers. Dae-sung's hand never left hers, but she could feel the tension radiating from him. His thumb traced circles on her palm, a gesture of affection that contrasted sharply with the deadly intent in his eyes. They lived in Hanam Dong, in a penthouse that overlooked the Han River. The luxury apartment was a far cry from Elizabeth's modest upbringing, but Daesung had made it a home.